I was 17 years old when my father threw me out of the house. Not because I got arrested. Not because I failed school. Not because I was lazy. I was kicked out because my stepmother decided her pregnant little princess deserved my bedroom more than I deserved a place to live. That was the day my father stopped being my dad. At least, that's how I see it now. Back then, I kept telling myself he would come after me. He never did. My mom died when I was 10. Cancer. One year she was teaching me how to make pancakes every Sunday morning. The next, I was standing beside her grave wondering how the world could keep spinning without her. Dad was devastated. For almost 2 years, it was just the two of us. We weren't rich, but we were happy. We'd order pizza every Friday, watch baseball together, and spend weekends fixing things around the house. He always told me, "No matter what happens, you'll always come first." I believed every word. Then he met Sandra. Sandra walked into our lives with designer handbags, fake smiles, and a 16-year-old daughter named Qley. At first, she acted like she wanted to be the perfect stepmom. She baked cookies, asked about school, bought me birthday presents. But the second Dad wasn't around, she became someone completely different. She criticized everything I did. "You eat too much. You breathe too loudly. No wonder boys your age don't have girlfriends." Little comments. Tiny cuts. Just enough that if I complained, she'd deny everything. Dad always believed her. A year later, Dad married Sandra. That's when things really changed. Our family photos disappeared. Pictures of Mom were quietly packed into boxes. Sandra redecorated the house from top to bottom. It was like my mother had never existed. When I asked where Mom's portrait had gone, Sandra smiled sweetly. "We're trying to move forward." Dad nodded. "You need to let go, son." That sentence hurt more than he ever knew. Qley adapted quickly. She realized the house revolved around her. She never cleaned. Never worked. Never heard the word "no." She borrowed my things without asking. Sold my gaming console to one of her friends because she needed shopping money. When I confronted her, she laughed. Dad made me apologize for yelling at her. Sandra stood behind him with the tiniest smirk. That was when I realized this wasn't my home anymore. I was just living in theirs. By the time I turned 17, I had 2 jobs. One after school at a grocery store. Another on weekends washing cars. I bought my own clothes. Paid for my own phone. Saved every dollar I could because something deep down told me I was going to need it. Meanwhile, Qley slept until noon, spent Sandra's money, and posted selfies all day. Sandra called her ambitious. I called her unemployed. That earned me a week without dinner. Dad said I needed to respect the women of the house. Funny. No one ever talked about respecting me. Then everything exploded. One Saturday evening, Sandra gathered everyone in the living room. She had tears in her eyes. Qley sat beside her, holding a pregnancy test. "I'm pregnant," she whispered. Dad looked like he'd been punched. Sandra immediately wrapped Qley in a hug. "We'll get through this together." Nobody asked who the father was. Nobody talked about responsibility. Instead, Sandra looked straight at me. "We're going to need your room." I laughed because I honestly thought she was joking. She wasn't. "I'm sorry, what?" Dad cleared his throat. "Your stepsister needs space for the baby. So, move her into the guest room." Sandra shook her head. "Too small." "The office?" "We need that." "The basement?" "Too cold." Then she smiled. "You can stay somewhere else." I stared at Dad. "You're seriously considering this?" He rubbed his forehead. "Son, it's only temporary." I looked around the room. Nobody looked uncomfortable. Nobody looked guilty. It was like they'd already decided. I was just the last person to find out. For the next week, Sandra made my life miserable. She'd leave baby magazines on my bed, measure my room while I was at school, talk loudly on the phone about finally making space for the nursery. It was psychological warfare. She wanted me gone before anyone had to actually ask. It didn't work. I wasn't leaving voluntarily. So she came up with another plan. 3 nights later, Dad stormed into my room holding Sandra's jewelry box. It was empty. His face was red with anger. "Where is it?" I blinked. "Where's what?" "Don't play dumb." Sandra burst into fake tears. "My mother's necklace is gone. I know he took it." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "I didn't steal anything." Qley crossed her arms. "I saw him near Mom's room yesterday." That was a lie. I had been at work. My manager could prove it. I told Dad exactly that. He didn't care. Sandra kept crying. Qley kept lying. And my father, my own father, believed them without a second thought. He pointed toward the front door. "Pack your things." Dad dash. "I said pack your things. I didn't steal anything. I've had enough of your lies." I looked at Sandra. She wasn't crying anymore. The moment Dad turned his head, she looked directly at me and smiled. A slow, satisfied smile. She'd planned every second of this. And she'd won. For now. Because while they celebrated getting rid of me, none of them realized one very important thing. The necklace they claimed I'd stolen was still inside Sandra's closet. And one day, the truth would destroy every single lie she'd built. I stood there in complete shock. "Dad, please!" "I didn't take anything." He wouldn't even look at me. "I said pack your things." Sandra wrapped an arm around Qley like she was protecting her from some dangerous criminal. "I don't want to call the police," she said between fake sobs. "Just leave, and we'll pretend this never happened." I almost laughed. Pretend? She had just accused me of stealing from my own home, and she wanted to pretend nothing had happened. I looked at Qley. She couldn't even hide the smug grin on her face. That was all the confirmation I needed. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a setup. I walked upstairs and opened my closet. Everything I owned fit into one old duffel bag and a backpack. A few pairs of jeans. Some t-shirts. My work uniform. My school books. The baseball glove my mom had bought me for my 12th birthday. I picked it up and smiled sadly. Mom used to tell me, "No matter how hard life gets, keep your head up. The truth always catches up with liars." I hoped she was right. Because at that moment, the truth felt very far away. When I came back downstairs, Dad was waiting by the front door. He held out a folded $50 bill. "Take this." I stared at it. Then I looked him in the eyes. "For what?" "So you can get by." I shook my head. "No." "Don't be stubborn." "I'm not." I gently pushed his hand away. "You've already decided I'm a thief. So keep your money." For the first time, I saw something flicker across his face. Guilt. Just for a second. Then Sandra spoke. "See? He's always been ungrateful." The guilt disappeared. Dad opened the front door. "You need to leave." I walked past him without saying another word. No goodbye. No hug. Nothing. The door slammed behind me. And just like that, I wasn't his son anymore. I called the only person I knew would answer. My best friend, Ryan. "Dude, what's up?" he said cheerfully. I need a place to stay." There was a long silence. "What happened?" "My dad kicked me out." Another silence. Then he said 3 words that changed everything. "I'm coming now." 20 minutes later, Ryan pulled into the neighborhood with his old pickup truck. The moment he saw the duffel bag in my hand, his smile disappeared. "You weren't kidding." I shook my head. He got out, threw my bag into the truck bed, and wrapped me in the biggest hug I'd ever received. "You've got me, brother." I nearly broke down right there. Not because of what he said. Because someone who wasn't related to me cared more than my own father. Ryan's parents didn't hesitate for even a second. His mom made me dinner. His dad helped me move my things into their spare room. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Mr. Thompson knocked on the bedroom door. "You awake?" "Yeah." He sat on the edge of the bed. "You know, I've watched you grow up. I know you're not a thief." That sentence hit me harder than getting thrown out. Someone else's father trusted me more than my own. I turned away so he wouldn't see the tears in my eyes. The next morning, I went to school. I tried acting normal. I failed. My English teacher pulled me aside after class. "You look exhausted." "I'm okay." She folded her arms. "No, you're not." The walls I'd built over the last 24 hours finally collapsed. I told her everything. Every single detail. She listened without interrupting. When I finished, she quietly said, "I'm calling the school counselor." I panicked. "No, please. You don't understand. If people find out, it'll make things worse." She smiled kindly. "No. It'll make sure you're not fighting this alone." Over the next few weeks, the school helped me more than my own family ever had. They connected me with legal aid, helped me apply for emergency financial assistance, made sure I had transportation to work. One teacher even paid for my graduation cap and gown without telling me. I only found out because the office accidentally mentioned it. Every act of kindness reminded me of one painful truth. Family isn't always the people you're born. Sometimes, it's the people who choose you. Meanwhile, I heard bits and pieces about life back at my dad's house. Apparently, Sandra wasted no time turning my bedroom into a nursery. She painted the walls yellow, bought expensive furniture, posted photos online with captions like, "Preparing for our little miracle." The comments were full of people calling her an amazing mother. If only they knew. That miracle nursery had been built on top of the life she'd stolen from a 17-year-old boy. About a month after I left, Ryan came home looking uncomfortable. "What?" He scratched the back of his neck. "I wasn't going to tell you. But what? I saw your dad today." My heart skipped. "Where?" "At the grocery store." "What did he say?" Ryan hesitated. "He asked if I'd seen you." I looked down. "And?" "I told him you were safe. Then he asked where you were living." I said it wasn't any of his business. Despite everything, a tiny part of me still wondered if Dad missed me. Ryan's next sentence destroyed that hope. "He wasn't asking because he was worried. He said he needed your signature on some paperwork involving the house." I laughed. A cold, bitter laugh. Of course. Even after throwing me away, the only thing he wanted from me was a signature. Not forgiveness. Not reconciliation. Just another favor. That night, I made myself a promise. I was done chasing a father who only remembered I existed when he needed something. From that moment on, I would build a life so successful that I would never need him again. I had no idea that years later, he'd be the one desperately needing me. And by then, I wouldn't be the scared 17-year-old boy standing on his front porch with a duffel bag. I'd be the man holding all the power. 3 weeks after I was kicked out, my phone rang while I was working the evening shift at the grocery store. "Dad." I stared at his name for several seconds. Part of me wanted to ignore it. The other part, the stupid part that still wanted a father, answered. "Hello?" His voice was flat. You need to come home. Not how are you. Not I'm sorry. Just an order? Why? The necklace still hasn't been found. I closed my eyes. I already told you I didn't take it. Then come prove it. The line went dead. Against my better judgment, I agreed to go. Not because I thought he'd apologize. I already knew better. I went because I wanted this nightmare to end. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed something that made my stomach twist. My bedroom window had pink curtains. Pink. I walked inside without knocking. The smell of fresh paint filled the house. Sandra smiled as if nothing had happened. Oh, look who decided to show up. Qley sat on the couch scrolling through her phone, one hand resting dramatically on her stomach. Dad stood in the kitchen with his arms crossed. He looked exhausted. We've searched everywhere, he said. The necklace is still missing. I shrugged. Then maybe you're searching the wrong places. Sandra's fake smile disappeared. What exactly is that supposed to mean? It means I didn't steal it. Dad rubbed his temples. This doesn't have to be difficult. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Difficult? You accused me of stealing. You kicked me out. You let me become homeless. And now you're talking about difficult? Sandra suddenly started crying. I can't believe you're attacking me after everything I've done for you. I laughed. Actually laughed. For me? You mean like throwing away my mom's pictures? Or giving my room away? Or convincing my dad I was a thief? Her tears stopped for just a second. Long enough for me to notice. Then they started again. Dad pointed toward me. That's enough. No. I'm done staying quiet. I looked directly at him. You never even asked for proof. You never asked where I was the night the necklace disappeared. I was at work. My manager can confirm it. You could have checked the security cameras. You could have called. You could have done anything. But instead, you believed Sandra. The room went silent. Then an idea hit me. If I'm really the thief. I pulled out my phone. Let's call the police. Sandra immediately froze. Dad blinked. What? I said let's call the police. They can investigate. They'll check fingerprints. They'll search the house. They'll interview everyone. I'm innocent. I've got nothing to hide. Qley suddenly sat upright. Mom! Sandra quickly grabbed Dad's arm. That's not necessary. I smiled. Why not? I thought you were so sure I stole it. Nobody answered. I took one slow step toward the hallway. Sandra immediately moved in front of me. Where do you think you're going? Looking. You've already searched. Maybe not well enough. You are not going into my bedroom. There it was. Fear. Real fear. I gently moved past her. She grabbed my arm. Dad shouted. Stop! I ignored both of them. Something in my gut told me I was right. I walked into Sandra's bedroom. Everything was spotless. Too spotless. Then I noticed her closet. It was the only place she hadn't wanted anyone near. I opened the closet door. Sandra rushed in behind me. Get out! Instead of listening, I started looking. Top shelf. Nothing. Drawer. Nothing. Then, behind a stack of expensive shoeboxes, I saw a small black velvet jewelry case. The exact same kind Sandra had described. I slowly picked it up. The entire room became silent. Sandra looked like she'd seen a ghost. I opened the box. Inside was the necklace. The same necklace she claimed I'd stolen. No one spoke. Dad stared at it. Then at Sandra. Then back at the necklace. His face slowly lost all its color. Sandra! She burst into tears. I can explain. Then explain. I only wanted to protect Qley. I didn't think things would go this far. Dad looked at Qley. You knew? She avoided his eyes. Mom said it was the only way. Those 7 words shattered whatever was left of my father's world. He turned toward me. His hands were shaking. Son! I held up my hand. No! I don't want to hear it. His eyes filled with tears. I made a mistake. A mistake? You accused your own son of stealing. You threw me out. You never even asked for my side. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. Nobody said a word. I placed the necklace on the kitchen table. There. You found it. Dad stepped closer. Please come home. I looked toward the hallway. My room was gone. A nursery had replaced it. The posters I'd spent years collecting. Gone. My desk. Gone. Everything that proved I'd ever lived there. Gone. I looked back at him. Where exactly would I come home to? He couldn't answer, because he already knew. There wasn't a place for me anymore. Not in that house. Not in that family. I picked up my backpack and walked toward the front door. Behind me, Dad called my name over and over. I never turned around. That was the last time I stepped inside my childhood home. Over the next 10 years, I built a life from nothing, while the family that chose lies over me slowly destroyed themselves. And one day, the father who had watched me walk away without stopping me would be standing outside my front door with nowhere else to go. After I walked out of that house for the second time, I made myself one promise. I would never go back. Not for an apology. Not for money. Not for family holidays. Nothing. If my father wanted to be a stranger, I'd treat him like one. I changed my phone number. Blocked Sandra and Qley on every social media account. The only people who knew where I lived were Ryan, his family, and a handful of close friends. As far as my father was concerned, I had disappeared. Life wasn't easy. During my senior year, I'd wake up at 5 in the morning to deliver newspapers before school. Classes ran until 3. Then I'd head straight to the grocery store and work until closing. Most nights, I didn't get home until after 10. I'd eat whatever leftovers Ryan's mom had saved for me, finish my homework, sleep for a few hours, and do it all again. I was exhausted. But every paycheck reminded me of something important. No one could throw me out anymore. No one controlled my future except me. Ryan's parents refused to let me pay rent until I graduated. Instead, they told me to save every dollar. Mr. Thompson sat me down one evening and handed me a notebook. Every dollar you earn gets written down. I looked at him, confused. What for? So you'll know where your money goes. He smiled. Rich people don't just earn money. They manage it. That notebook became my obsession. I tracked every paycheck, every expense, every dollar I saved. Without realizing it, Mr. Thompson was teaching me lessons my own father never had. Graduation day finally arrived. The auditorium was packed. Families were cheering, taking pictures, laughing together. When my name was called, I heard someone shouting louder than anyone else. That's my boy! It was Mr. Thompson. People turned to look. I couldn't stop smiling. For one moment, I forgot my father wasn't there. After the ceremony, Ryan's mom hugged me so tightly I could barely breathe. We're proud of you. 3 simple words. I had spent years wanting to hear them from my dad. Instead, they came from people who owed me nothing. A month later, I started community college while working full-time. It wasn't glamorous. I couldn't afford a fancy university. So I took classes during the day and worked nights. My classmates spent weekends partying. I spent mine studying or picking up overtime. Every assignment, every exam, every promotion at work, moved me one step further away from the boy who'd been thrown out with a duffel bag. Years passed. I transferred to a 4-year university and earned a business degree. When I graduated, I landed an entry-level job at a financial consulting firm. The pay wasn't amazing, but I worked harder than everyone else. If someone needed help, I volunteered. If there was extra training, I signed up. If a client had a problem, I stayed until it was solved. People noticed. Within 5 years, I'd been promoted 3 times. By the time I turned 30, I was earning more money in 1 year than my father ever had. One evening, Ryan invited me out for dinner. Halfway through the meal, he looked at me carefully. "You ever wonder about your dad?" I shrugged. "Not really." He nodded slowly. "I ran into your old neighbor last week." I didn't say anything. "They've had a rough few years." I raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" Ryan leaned back in his chair. "Apparently Qley's boyfriend disappeared before the baby was born." I wasn't surprised. "Then another guy came along. She had another kid. He left too. And another after that." I blinked. "Seriously?" Ryan nodded. 3 kids. 3 different fathers. None of them stuck around. What about Sandra?" Ryan let out a dry laugh. "Still blaming everyone else. She tells people all men are trash. The irony, right?" I couldn't help smiling. "And Dad?" Ryan's expression turned serious. "He took out loans. Lots of them. For hospital bills. For baby supplies. For Qley's credit card debt. For Sandra's shopping. He even refinanced the house." I slowly put my fork down. "That house was almost paid off. Not anymore." Over the next year, I heard more stories. Qley never kept a job longer than a few months. Whenever someone criticized her, Sandra defended her. "It's because she's a single mother. It's because life's been unfair. It's because men failed her." Never once did they admit Qley was responsible for her own choices. Dad kept paying, kept borrowing, kept sacrificing. Just like he had sacrificed me. The only difference was, I had learned how to stand on my own. They had learned how to depend on him. Then one afternoon, I received a message from an old family friend. It contained just one sentence. "Your dad tried to sell your late mother's wedding ring yesterday." I stared at the screen. Mom's wedding ring? The one she'd worn every single day? The one Dad promised he'd keep forever? He was selling it? For money? I didn't reply. But something inside me shifted. Because if things were that bad, then the collapse was closer than I thought. And I had a feeling it wouldn't be long before the man who once told me to figure it out would come asking me to save the family he chose over his own son. 3 years passed after I heard about my mother's wedding ring. I never reached out. Not once. If my father wanted to sell the last thing that connected him to my mom, that was his decision. I wasn't going to stop him. I had spent too many years cleaning up his mistakes. Those days were over. By 33, my life looked nothing like it had when I was 17. I owned a beautiful 4-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood. Not because I wanted a big house. Because every room reminded me that no one could ever tell me to leave again. I drove a nice truck. Had money invested. No debt. A career I loved. Most importantly, I slept peacefully every night. No screaming. No manipulation. No walking on eggshells. Just peace. It was worth more than any paycheck. One Saturday morning, I was making breakfast when my security camera sent a notification to my phone. Someone was at the front gate. I glanced at the screen. The spatula slipped out of my hand. Standing outside my house was my father. For a moment, I honestly wondered if I was imagining things. His hair, once dark brown, was almost completely gray. His clothes were wrinkled. His shoulders were slumped. He looked 20 years older than the last time I'd seen him. He wasn't alone. Sandra stood beside him. She looked nothing like the elegant woman who used to spend hundreds on designer clothes. Her expensive handbags were gone. Her makeup couldn't hide the deep lines on her face. She looked angry. Even now. Even after everything. I didn't move. The doorbell rang. Then again. Then again. Finally, I walked to the front door. I opened it just enough to step outside. Neither of them smiled. Dad looked like he was about to cry. Sandra looked like she'd swallowed something bitter. For several long seconds, nobody spoke. Finally, Dad whispered, "You look good." I nodded once. "What do you want?" He lowered his eyes. "We need to talk." "I don't. Please. It's important." I folded my arms. "You have 60 seconds. Sandra rolled her eyes. "Honestly, Robert, let's just tell him." I looked at her. Robert. She still spoke to my father like he was a child. Some things never changed. Dad took a deep breath. "We lost the house." I said nothing. "The bank foreclosed on it." Still nothing. "We've been staying in motels." Silence. "Now, we've run out of money." Sandra stepped forward. "You have plenty of space here." I actually laughed. She frowned. "What's so funny?" I looked around at my house. "My house?" She crossed her arms. "Don't be childish. Family helps family." I stared at her for several seconds. Then I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Interesting. When I was 17 and homeless, did family help family?" Sandra's face tightened. "That was different." "No, it wasn't." Dad looked completely defeated. "I know I failed you. I know I made terrible choices. I'm asking for one chance. Just until we get back on our feet." I looked directly into his eyes. For the first time in years, I saw genuine regret. Unfortunately for him, regret comes too late sometimes. "You remember the day you kicked me out?" He nodded slowly. "You told me to figure it out." "I did." I spread my arms toward the house. "This is me figuring it out?" Sandra scoffed. "So you're just going to let your own father become homeless?" I looked at her. "Didn't seem to bother you when I was." She opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Dad whispered, "You don't have to forgive me. I know that. But please, I have nowhere else to go." For a brief second, I saw the scared man he'd become. Then I remembered the scared 17-year-old boy standing on the front porch with a duffel bag. The boy begging his father to believe him. The boy who had nowhere to sleep. That memory erased every ounce of sympathy. I reached into my wallet, pulled out a crisp $50 bill. The exact amount Dad had tried to give me the day he threw me out. I placed it in his hand. He stared at it. His face slowly fell. He remembered. Of course he remembered. "I think this belongs to you," I said quietly. His hand started shaking. "I don't want your money." I nodded. "I know. I didn't want yours either." The color drained from Sandra's face as she realized exactly what I had done. Dad looked like he might collapse. Tears rolled down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, son." I took one. Stepped back toward my front door. "I believe you. And it still changes nothing." Then, I gently closed the door. Through the security camera, I watched them stand there in silence. Neither of them knocked again. But this wasn't the end. Because a week later, I received a phone call from someone I never expected. And what they told me about Sandra and Qley would make losing the house look like the smallest problem they had ever faced. A week after I closed the door on my father, my phone rang. The caller ID surprised me. Uncle David, Dad's older brother. We hadn't spoken in nearly 15 years. I answered cautiously. Hello? His deep voice came through the speaker. Hey, kid. There was an awkward silence. I know I probably don't have the right to call you that anymore. I smiled faintly. It's okay, Uncle David. He sighed. I heard Robert came to see you. So word had already spread. Yeah. And? I told him no. Another long silence. Then, you made the right decision. I wasn't expecting that. I thought you'd tell me to forget him. I used to think that. His voice grew heavier. But I know things now that I didn't know back then. I frowned. What do you mean? He took a deep breath. Can we meet? That evening, we met at a quiet diner halfway between our towns. The moment I saw him, I realized how much he'd aged. He hugged me tightly. I'm sorry. For what? For not protecting you. We sat down. Neither of us touched the menus. After a minute, he reached into a worn leather folder and slid a stack of papers across the table. I think these belong to you. I looked down. My heart stopped. Across the top of the first page were the words, Last Will and Testament. My mother's name. I looked up in disbelief. What is this? Your mother's original will. I felt my hands begin to shake. I've never seen this. I know. Your father was supposed to give it to you when you turned 18. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. He never did. Uncle David slowly shook his head. No, he didn't. I started reading. With every paragraph, my anger grew. My mother had left everything she personally owned to me. Her jewelry, her savings, her life insurance, even the antique watch that had belonged to my grandfather. Everything. There was also a handwritten letter. To my son, if you're reading this, I hope your father kept his promise to protect you. I couldn't read another word. My vision blurred with tears. Mom had trusted him. Completely. And he betrayed that trust. I looked back at Uncle David. How did you get this? He leaned back in his chair. Your mother asked me to keep a copy. I forgot about it for years. But after Robert showed up asking everyone for money, I went looking through old files. When I found it, I realized what he'd done. I clenched my jaw. So everything Sandra took, the jewelry, the insurance money, my mother's belongings, they were supposed to be mine. He nodded. Legally. Yes. For several seconds, neither of us spoke. Then Uncle David quietly added, There's more. I looked at him. Sandra never convinced your father to sell your mother's jewelry. He gave it to her willingly. I closed my eyes. He didn't just allow Sandra to erase Mom. He helped her do it. And Qley? I asked. Uncle David let out a humorless laugh. She's in serious trouble. What happened? Credit card fraud. I blinked. What? She opened credit cards in other people's names. Ran up thousands of dollars in debt. She's under investigation. I stared at him. So that's why they lost everything? He nodded. That wasn't even the worst part. Robert emptied his retirement account trying to pay her debts. He borrowed against the house. He sold your mother's wedding ring. He sold almost everything of value. And when the money ran out, so did everyone Qley called a friend. I wasn't surprised. People who use others rarely stay loyal. Uncle David reached across the table. I need to ask you something. What? If Robert loses this investigation, he could end up bankrupt. I looked at him calmly. Okay. He searched my face. You're not going to help him. I remembered the freezing night I was 17. Standing outside with one duffel bag. begging my father to believe me. Remembering that made the answer easy. No, I don't hate him anymore. I just don't trust him. And I refuse to let his choices become my responsibility. Uncle David slowly nodded. I figured you'd say that. Then he smiled. You know, your mother would have been proud of the man you've become. Those words hit harder than anything else that day. Because for the first time in years, I felt like someone had finally seen me. Not as the boy who got kicked out. Not as the kid who was falsely accused. But as the man who survived all of it. As we stood to leave, Uncle David handed me one last envelope. What's this? A copy of every document. In case you decide to fight for what's rightfully yours. I tucked the envelope under my arm. I had no interest in revenge through anger. But I did believe in accountability. And soon, Sandra and Qley were about to discover that the lies they'd built their lives on were finally catching up to them. I drove home with the envelope sitting on the passenger seat. I didn't open it again. I already knew what was inside. Proof. Proof that my mother had never forgotten me. Proof that she'd planned for my future. Proof that my father had broken the one promise he made to her. That night, I barely slept. I kept thinking about the letter. I hope your father kept his promise to protect you. He hadn't. Not even close. The next morning, I called a lawyer. One with an excellent reputation for handling inheritance disputes. His name was Michael Carter. After reviewing the documents, he looked at me and asked one question. Why did you wait so long? I didn't know any of this existed. He nodded. That explains everything. He organized the papers into neat piles. The copy of the will. The handwritten letter. Financial records. Insurance documents. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair. You have a very strong case. I didn't smile. Winning a lawsuit wouldn't give me my childhood back. But it could finally hold the right people accountable. A week later, legal notices were delivered to my father and Sandra. I heard about their reaction from Uncle David. Sandra exploded. He's trying to steal from us. My father quietly corrected her. No. He's asking for what belonged to him. According to Uncle David, that was the first time Dad had ever openly admitted they had wronged me. Sandra wasn't interested in admitting anything. She blamed me. She blamed the lawyer. She blamed Uncle David. She even blamed my late mother. Anyone except herself. The court process took months. Sandra delayed hearings. Claimed missing paperwork. Asked for extensions. Anything to drag it out. But documents don't lie. Bank records showed exactly where my mother's insurance money had gone. Into joint accounts. Luxury vacations. Designer handbags. New furniture. Even the down payment on the SUV Sandra had proudly driven around town for years. Every receipt painted the same picture. While I was working 2 jobs as a teenager, they had been spending the money my mother left for me. The judge wasn't impressed. During one hearing, Sandra tried crying on the witness stand. She claimed she had only used the money for the family. The judge calmly asked, Which family? She looked confused. He continued, The son your husband threw out at 17? The one who received none of these funds? Sandra had no answer. For the first time in years, her tears didn't work. Then my father was called to testify. He looked exhausted, older than I remembered. The judge asked him a simple question. Did you know your late wife's will left these assets to your son? Dad lowered his head. Yes. Did you distribute them according to her wishes? A long silence filled the courtroom. Finally, no. The courtroom became completely silent. There it was. No excuses. No blaming Sandra. No blaming Qley. Just the truth. He had chosen not to honor my mother's final wishes. Months later, The judge issued the ruling. I won. Sandra and my father were ordered to repay a substantial portion of the money they had wrongfully used. They were also ordered to return several family heirlooms that had somehow escaped being sold. Among them, my grandfather's antique watch, my mother's handwritten recipe book, several photo albums, and one small wooden jewelry box. The jewelry was gone, sold years earlier, but the box remained. I ran my fingers across it when I got home. It still smelled faintly like my mother's perfume. For the first time since I was 10 years old, I cried, not because I was angry, because after all those years, I finally had a piece of her back. The financial judgment completely destroyed what little stability my father and Sandra had left. They couldn't make the payments. The remaining assets were seized. The motel they had been living in eventually asked them to leave when they fell behind on rent. Uncle David called me a few days later. They're living in their car now. I was quiet. He hesitated before asking, "How do you feel?" I looked around my living room at the framed photo of my mother that now hung above the fireplace, the exact place where it had once been before Sandra took it down. I paused. Free. Not happy. Not excited. Just free. Because the little boy who had spent years wondering why he wasn't enough had finally learned the truth. He had always been enough. The people who failed were the adults who were supposed to protect him. But life still had one final twist waiting for me. A twist involving Qley that would leave even my father speechless and finally force Sandra to face consequences she could no longer escape. A few months after the court ruled in my favor, I thought everything was finally over. I'd gotten back what little remained of my mother's belongings. My father and Sandra had lost nearly everything. Qley was still under investigation for fraud. I figured our lives would never cross again. I was wrong. It started with another phone call from Uncle David. "You sitting down?" "I am now." He let out a long sigh. "You remember how Qley always claimed every man she dated was the problem?" "Yeah. Turns out they weren't." I wasn't surprised. One of her ex-boyfriends hired an attorney. For what? To fight for custody. I frowned. I thought he disappeared. So did everyone else. He didn't disappear. He left because Sandra demanded money every month if he wanted to see his son. I blinked. What? It wasn't just him. There were 2 other fathers. They all told the same story. According to Uncle David, every man who tried to be involved in his child's life faced the same routine. Sandra would tell them they were unfit, demand money, threaten court, threaten to ruin their reputation. If they refused, she'd block all contact. For years, everyone believed Sandra's version of events. Until the 3 men met through a family court support group. When they compared stories, everything matched. The same threats, the same demands, the same manipulation. One of the fathers had saved every text message, every voicemail, every email. Sandra had unknowingly documented years of manipulation. When those messages reached the family court, the judge wasn't amused. Instead of looking like a protective grandmother, Sandra suddenly looked like someone who had been controlling everyone around her for years. The court ordered a full investigation. Social workers interviewed neighbors, teachers, doctors, even former friends. The picture they painted was ugly. Sandra constantly lied, exaggerated, manipulated people against each other. And Qley had learned from the best. A month later, local gossip spread like wildfire. One by one, the fathers were granted shared custody of their children. For the first time, Sandra couldn't stop it. She screamed in the courthouse hallway, threatened everyone, even blamed the judge. Security eventually escorted her outside. Uncle David happened to be there. He told me people actually applauded when she was removed from the building. Meanwhile, Qley's fraud case finally reached court. She accepted a plea deal to avoid a longer prison sentence. Part of that deal required her to pay restitution for the money she'd stolen. Money she didn't have. The judge ordered wage garnishment for any future income she earned. Considering she barely held a job, that debt would follow her for years. As for my father, he looked like a ghost. According to Uncle David, he barely spoke anymore. He spent most days doing odd jobs for cash. Cleaning yards. Painting fences. Anything people would pay him for. Not because Sandra appreciated it. Because she demanded it. Even after losing everything, she still blamed him. If you had controlled your son, we wouldn't be in this mess. When Uncle David told me that, I actually laughed. After all these years, Sandra still couldn't accept responsibility. One afternoon, I was organizing boxes in my garage when I found my old baseball glove. The one Mom had bought me. I smiled. Then I noticed something tucked inside. A folded piece of paper. I opened it carefully. It was a note written in my mother's handwriting. To my favorite catcher, life isn't fair. Some people will disappoint you. But never let someone else's choices decide the kind of man you become. I'm already proud of you. Love, Mom. I sat there in silence for a long time. That note meant more than every dollar I'd won in court. Because it reminded me of something I'd forgotten. My mother had believed in me long before anyone else did. A few days later, I received an unexpected email. The sender's name made me stop. Robert. My father. The subject line contained only 4 words. Please read this. I stared at the screen for several minutes. For years, he'd only reached out when he needed something. This time felt different. I had no idea that opening that email would reveal the one secret he'd hidden from me all these years. A secret that would finally explain why he'd become a man I barely recognized. I stared at the email for almost an hour. Part of me wanted to delete it without reading a single word. Another part. The little boy who had spent years waiting for his father to choose him. Needed to know what it said. Finally, I clicked it. There was no greeting. No excuses. Just one sentence. Please let me explain before it's too late. Below it was a letter. A real letter. Long. Messy. Filled with spelling mistakes and crossed out sentences. It looked like it had been rewritten over and over again. Son, I know I don't deserve your time. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I just need you to know the truth before I die. Every terrible thing that happened started because I was too weak to stand up for you. Nobody forced me. Nobody controlled me. Those were my choices. I blamed Sandra because it was easier than admitting I had failed as a father. I stopped reading. For years, I had imagined my dad as a victim. A man manipulated by an evil woman. Now he was admitting something I never expected. He wasn't just manipulated. He had chosen the easy path. I kept reading. The day Sandra accused you of stealing the necklace. I knew something didn't feel right. You looked me in the eyes and told me you were innocent. I believed you for 1 second. Then I looked at Sandra crying. I chose her because I was afraid she'd leave me. I was so scared of losing another wife that I ended up losing my son. My chest tightened. That single paragraph explained everything. It wasn't about the necklace. It wasn't about Qley. It wasn't even about me. It was about a coward who was terrified of being alone. And I had paid the price. The letter continued. Every night after you left, I walked past your empty room. I wanted to call you. I wanted to apologize. Sandra always had another reason to wait. Another excuse. Eventually, I stopped trying. That was the biggest mistake of my life. I shook my head. No. The biggest mistake wasn't failing to call. It was watching me walk out that front door. Everything after that was just another bad decision. Near the end of the letter, his handwriting became shaky. I have cancer. The doctors say it has spread. They don't know how much time I have left. I read that sentence twice. Then a third time. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel sad. I just sat there. Sometimes, when someone hurts you deeply enough, your emotions don't disappear. They simply run out. The final paragraph read, I don't want money. I don't want your house. I don't even want forgiveness. I only wanted you to know that none of this was your fault. You were always a good son. I just wasn't a good father. I'm sorry. That was it. No dramatic ending. No request to meet. No demand for another chance. Just, I'm sorry. I closed my laptop and walked outside. For nearly 20 minutes, I sat on my back porch watching the sun go down. The letter answered questions I carried for 16 years. Why didn't he fight for me? Why didn't he believe me? Why didn't he stop Sandra? Because he was afraid. Not of me. Of being alone. That fear had cost him everything. His marriage. His home. His retirement. His relationship with his only son. And now, his remaining time. The next morning, Uncle David called. I was going to tell you. I already know. He emailed me. Uncle David was quiet. He doesn't have much time. I know. So what? Are you going to see him? I looked at the framed photo of my mother hanging in my living room. Then at the note she'd hidden inside my baseball glove. Never let someone else's choices decide the kind of man you become. I smiled sadly. I'll see him. But not because he earned it. Because Mom raised me better than that. 2 days later, I drove to a small charity hospice on the edge of town. The nurse led me to room 14. She stopped outside the door. He's been waiting for you. I took a deep breath, placed my hand on the doorknob, and slowly pushed the door open. The man lying in the bed barely looked like my father. He looked up. Our eyes met. For the first time in 16 years. There was no Sandra. No Qley. No lies. Just a father. And the son he had spent a lifetime losing. What happened during that final conversation would change both of us forever. The room was silent. Machines beeped softly beside the bed. The man lying there looked nothing like the father I remembered. He was thin. His hair was almost gone. His hands trembled as he tried to sit up. When he saw me, tears immediately filled his eyes. You came. I pulled a chair over and sat down. I said I would. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. There wasn't much left to say. 16 years of silence can't be fixed in 5 minutes. Dad finally broke the silence. I've imagined this conversation 1,000 times. So have I. I always thought you'd yell. I thought you'd tell me you hated me. I looked at him calmly. I don't hate you. His shoulders relaxed for just a second. Then I finished my sentence. I just stopped needing you. Those words hit him harder than any insult ever could. He lowered his head. I deserve that. For the next hour, he talked. Really talked. No excuses. No blaming Sandra. No blaming Qley. Just the truth. I chose the easy path every single time. I thought keeping everyone happy would make me a good husband. Instead, it made me a terrible father. I watched Sandra erase your mother from our home. I watched her treat you like an outsider. And every time I stayed quiet, it became easier to stay quiet the next time. He wiped his eyes. I failed you long before I threw you out. I nodded. Yes. He looked around the room before reaching into the drawer beside his bed. I have something for you. He handed me a small envelope. Inside was an old photograph. It was me and him. I couldn't have been more than 8 years old. We were covered in mud after a fishing trip, both laughing at the camera. Written on the back in my mother's handwriting were the words, "My 2 favorite boys." Dad smiled through his tears. I carried that picture every day. I didn't deserve to. I slipped it back into the envelope. No, you didn't. A nurse quietly entered the room. She adjusted his medication and smiled politely before leaving us alone again. Dad looked at me. I changed my will. I raised an eyebrow. I don't have much left. But everything I still own. It's yours. I shook my head. I don't want it. You should. No. I spent half my life rebuilding what I lost. I don't need anything else. He looked disappointed. Then he nodded. I understand. After another long silence, he whispered, Can you answer one question? I didn't respond. Did you ever have a good life? I almost laughed. I have a great life. I own my home. I love my job. I have people who actually care about me. I sleep peacefully. I wake up happy. I built everything myself. A tear rolled down his cheek. I'm proud of you. I smiled politely. I know. It wasn't arrogance. It was acceptance. I didn't need his approval anymore. Years ago I had. Now, it was simply too late. As I stood to leave, Dad reached for my hand. I let him hold it. Just for a moment. I'm sorry, son. I know. Can you forgive me? I thought carefully before answering. Then I told him the truth. I forgive you. His face brightened. Before he could speak, I continued. But forgiveness doesn't erase consequences. It doesn't give us back birthdays. It doesn't replace the years we lost. It doesn't make us father and son again. It simply means I'm choosing not to carry this anger anymore. He closed his eyes and nodded. I understand. I wish I'd understood sooner. So do I. I squeezed his hand once. Then I stood. At the door, I looked back one final time. He gave me a weak smile. Goodbye, son. Goodbye, Dad. Those were the last words we ever spoke. 3 days later, Uncle David called. Robert had passed away peacefully in his sleep. I attended the funeral. Not because people expected me to. Because I wanted closure. Sandra was there. She looked 20 years older. Qley avoided my eyes completely. Neither of them spoke to me. Neither did I. After the service, people slowly left until only Uncle David and I remained by the grave. He placed a hand on my shoulder. He loved you. I looked at the headstone. I know. He just loved himself too much to do the right thing. Uncle David nodded sadly. I can't argue with that. A few weeks later, I visited my mother's grave. I placed fresh flowers beside her headstone. Then I took the old photograph from my pocket. The one with the 3 of us before everything fell apart. I smiled. You kept your promise, Mom. You believed in me. I made it. The wind rustled through the trees as if answering. For the first time since I was 17, there was no anger. No bitterness. Just peace. People often ask if I regret refusing to let my father move into my home. My answer is always the same. No. Because helping someone after they destroy your life isn't kindness. It's sacrificing yourself to protect them from the consequences of their own choices. I had already done that once as a child. I refuse to do it again as a man. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so full of happiness that the people who underestimated you are forced to watch from the outside, knowing they had every chance to be part of it, and threw it away themselves.